Good afternoon, my name is Rob Pollard and I'm the developer for Sojour, which is a solo focused VTT. In this video we're going to be discussing all of the enhancements that have been added to it since version 1.0 was released, and this video is actually focusing specifically on version 1.1. A lot of that focus will be on trackable characteristics because that's a pretty big thing that got added, although we will be covering some of the other enhancements. Whilst I'm here, I'd like to thank everybody that's taken the punt and bought Sojour. I know that can be quite a difficult decision, especially if you're buying from an unknown developer, but hopefully you're happy with the product as it is right now. But as I say, this is only the beginning, and this is a very early version of Sojour, and I see it getting better and better and better as time goes forwards. And of course, I'm adding features both from ideas that I have, but also from feedback that you folks provide as well. So hopefully we'll all end up with the product that we want. Now, when you install version 1.1, it's going to update a lot of the data in your games in order to make it compatible. I just want to talk about that briefly, just so that you understand a little bit about the mechanisms involved. So basically, whenever you run an updated version of Sojour, it looks at your game files and it checks it against its own internal versions, and if it notices it's an earlier version, it will then patch the data. Now, in my mind, your data is very valuable to you. You might have hours of time invested in your gameplay, and the last thing I want to do is have Sojour break your games. So whilst every effort is put into making sure the upgrade process is seamless, I have provided a backup mechanism as well, just for in case. And what that backup mechanism does is, prior to Sojour updating your data, it literally takes an entire copy of your Sojour data directory and it pops it into Sojour backups. So normally your Sojour game directory is under Polysoft and Documents, and what you'll find is after Sojour has updated your game, you have a brand new folder there called Sojour Backups, and in there will be all of the backups. And as I said, each backup folder is essentially a complete copy of your original Sojour folder. And what Sojour does, you get 2 bits of information with each folder name. You get the update number, so here I've had 3 updates run on this, and this is actually a very old game from one of my first videos, and I'm just making sure that the updater was successfully updating everything, and it was. So you get the version number, but it also tells you the compatible version of Sojour. So if I wanted to use this backup here, I would need to install Sojour version 1.0.8.0. Of course, I can install later versions, but if I do install later versions, they'll go and patch that data again to take it back up to the latest. So hence why I give you the compatible version numbers. So it's probably a good thing if you, I guess, hold on to your installers. I tend to leave the last 2 or 3 up on DriveThru, and each installer comes off my build server with a version number. So as you can see here, Sojour 1.1.0.0, but they're all versioned these days, so it should be easy to identify the installer that you can pair with the relevant backup. And to use these backups, all you need to do, in essence, is you'll need to uninstall Sojour and install the version that's compatible. So if I was going to use backup number 2, I would uninstall Sojour and install 1.0.8. I would then, whilst Sojour was off, copy this directory up to this level. In fact, you probably want to delete your original Sojour folder because that contains your current data, or at least move it somewhere else. And the idea is you copy the relevant backup folder up a level and just rename it to Sojour, and everything should work with your backup data with the version of Sojour that backup data was designed to be run with. And as I said, if you do run a later version of Sojour, that later version will update your data anyway. So this is a fallback mechanism to be aware of for in case things go wrong. I mean, they shouldn't, but it's there just for in case. So now we're going to run up version 1.1. And what I've done here, I'm actually running it, or I have run it on, like I said earlier, a very early save. This is one from one of my earliest demo videos. So you run it up, and when you first run it up on an existing game, like I've done here, at first it doesn't look like much has changed, but there are little changes that you should be able to spot straight away. Like in the journal, for instance, you'll notice the health bars are now vertical as opposed to horizontal like they were in the old system. And the reason why I've changed that is because this system supports more than one health bar, and I found that if you stack them horizontally, they just took up too much space, so everything's gone vertical. The other difference you'll notice is that you can now see health bars on the actual map itself. That's brand new. But not everything's been given health bars by default, and that's because the original Sojour only NPCs had hit points, and that was it. In fact, that was the only characteristic they had, was hit points. You had no choice. So if your RPG system didn't have hit points, you kind of had this green bar which you couldn't really use. But that's all changed with 1.1. We have a very flexible system in place right now. So what this has done is taken those old hit points on the NPCs and converted it to using the new system, and I can kind of show you that now. If we pop into these tokens and actually have a look at them, we should be able to see what it's done. So here's the goblin properties. You might notice a few changes to this dialogue if you've used Sojour in the past. The first big change, no, it's not a big change, it's a relatively small one, but it's hopefully a welcome change, is that the notes pane is now using a Sojour journal control as opposed to just a text document, and that enables you to put in rich text in there. It's got spell checking, you can do dice rolls in there and all sorts of things, basically nearly everything like the actual journals can. So there's an improvement there. But you can also see we've got this new Trackable Characteristics section, and that's the brand new feature that replaces those old fixed hit points. And what the upgrade process has done, it's automatically created a set called Characteristics and automatically added hit points to that set, and then converted your existing parameters across. And you see it's color coded as well, so you know hit points is green and they appear as green there. So yeah, and all that happened automatically. You don't need to do any of this. Sojour will automatically update your existing data. So what about the actual characters themselves? They don't have any hit bars. What's going on there? As I mentioned earlier, the previous version of Sojour, your characters couldn't have any characteristics that you could track. I think the reason why, the original design intent is that you'd use your character sheets to actually keep track of the various values. But in this new system, everything can have these health bars, and I'll show that later on. But if you open up an existing character, what you can see Sojour's done is, in effect, it's disabled characteristics for your characters because they never had them in the first place. That's not to say you can't ever have them, because if you want to add them, you just tick that to enable them, and then you can go and use the characteristic system, which I'll go into more detail later on. So that's what the upgrade process does, and there are obviously lots of other little enhancements throughout the system that we'll go into as we go along. So I think the best way forward at this point is I'm going to create a whole brand new rule set, one to actually represent Mongoose's Traveller tabletop role-playing game, and that way you can see from scratch how the new characteristic system works and see what you can do with it, and it is very, very flexible. And whilst I'm doing that, I can cover off some of the other enhancements, like the way we scale maps these days. That's been enhanced big time. So on to the next thing, which is to create our new rule set. So let's shut Windows Guardians there. And in fact, before we start, because we're going to be modelling Traveller has its own calendar. It doesn't use the Earth calendar, it uses the Third Imperium calendar. Now, when you buy Sojour, you actually get 3 or 4 calendars for free. And now you can actually create your own calendars. You're not limited to the ones that Sojour provides, and in fact I will do a video on that showing you how to create your own calendars. It's a very powerful and flexible system, but I do provide a few to get you going. A Grantham one for RuneQuest, Harptos, which is a Sword Coast calendar for Dungeons and Dragons, and a Third Imperium calendar for Traveller, which is what we're going to use now. As I say, the system, you can create any calendar that you want. So there we go, we now have a Third Imperium calendar. Now we're going to add our new rule set, which is for Traveller. Give it a name. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Sojour, this is quite different. In the old days, all you used to get was the rule set name and measurements, i.e. whether using imperial or metric for that rule set. Everything else below that is completely brand new. And that's because the new version of Sojour supports what I call trackable characteristics. So I guess before we go into those, I guess the big question is, what are they? What is a trackable characteristic? So basically, a trackable characteristic is any kind of characteristic that you can associate with an entity in Sojour. And it could be anything. It could be a character, it could be an NPC, it could be a campaign asset, anything. And the idea is it's a characteristic that can change over time. And Sojour allows you to change these characteristics so that it can keep track of the values. And they show up as these health bars. And you're not limited to one. In fact, you go up to 4 health bars for each entity. Now, internally, this system's actually coded to be able to handle as many trackable characteristics as you can throw at it. But I've, for the moment, limited it to 4. And the reason why is because my control scheme for manipulating them on the map, there's only like 4 combinations, which is why I've limited it to 4. However, I do have some great ideas on how to get around that limitation, and that's for a future iteration. Because as I mentioned earlier in this video, Sojour as a product won't stand still. It will get better and better and better as time goes forward. Everything will be iterated on, and you won't be paying a thing other than your initial $10. All of these updates are effectively free. So these characteristics, they enable you to keep track of varying bits and bobs. And by default, when you create a rule set, you get hit points by default, because they tend to be pretty normal. However, for Traveller doesn't use hit points. The way Traveller works, I think your characters have 6 or 7 characteristics that define them, but the first 3, which are strength, dex and endurance, those 3 together kind of make up your hit points. So we're going to do that now. Now, what I should say before I update this is, whilst you can't change the measurement system because that's quite ingrained into the rule set, so be careful about the measurement system. Everything else on here you can change later on. You can change the name of the rule set, and you can change these characteristics later on, or add to them, or do whatever you want. So you don't even need to set these characteristics out right now if you don't want to. And if you're not interested in Sojour tracking anything, then just delete this, hit remove, get rid of the characteristic set, and you don't need to deal with them. It's all optional. And even when you have them here, you can turn them on and off for the entities anyway, and I'll show that in a second. So let's go and add the characteristics that Traveller supports. So firstly, it's strength. And my typing is going to be a little bit bad because I've got a microphone almost in my face here, and it's obscuring the keyboard a little bit. You can change the colour. Let's go blue for that. And there's an effects mortality flag. I'll go into what all of these do once I get all the Traveller ones in, so then I can talk about them all together. So dexterity, dex, and again we'll pick a colour. You're not limited to these colours either. You can hit define colours and just go for it, create anything that you want. But I'm just going to use like the default system ones. And then finally, endurance is the other one using Traveller. I'll give that what colour? Let's go for purple. Right, so we have our 3 trackable characteristics, are the ones that vary over time and we're kind of interested in. So what are all these characteristics? Firstly, you have the name. which that appears on your details pages, the full name. You have an abbreviation that will appear on all your tooltips, and you also have the colour, and that refers to the colour of the health bars that this will produce. And it's also used in the colour coding within the various forms as well, and I'll show that as well. And the other important thing is affects mortality. So as you know from earlier versions of Sojour, by default, when a token's hit points go to 0 or less, the token's removed. It's treated as being dead. However, with this new system, you have a lot of flexibility with how you define mortality. And the way it works is that when you make a characteristic as part of your mortality calculations, what you're basically saying is that all of these that I've ticked have to be at 0 or less for Sojour to treat this token as dead. So in this Traveller example, strength, dexterity and endurance, all three of them need to be at 0 or below for Sojour to treat it as a dead character. And of course you can add other characteristics and not have the mortality flag ticked, in which case those characteristics can go down to 0 and Sojour won't care about those or use them for the death calculations. There is an additional setting here where you can actually say, okay, all of these affect mortality, but at the same time, if any one of them goes to 0, I want the character to die off, so you just tick that. And I will show you presentations on that later on. Now the final setting is whether or not your characteristics are going to be in decimal or hexadecimal. So some RPGs, and Traveller is a very infamous one for this, use hexadecimal for the characteristics. And Sojour supports that. All you need to do is just tick the hex, and because Traveller uses hexadecimal, we're going to pick that. So that's everything I'm going to do for the moment with characteristics, but we will be revisiting that and editing it as I take you through the video. So we've created our brand new Traveller rule set. The next thing you need to do before you can really do anything in it is create a campaign. And a campaign is basically, it represents a bunch of scenarios that are all set in a coherent time and place. So let's go set up a campaign. And this is exactly the same as Sojour was originally. Let's use a campaign name for one that I currently am running, called the Farquhar campaign. And at this point you need to pick a calendar because Sojour tracks time. And yeah, there we go. So we have a campaign and we're pretty much ready to go at this point. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a map. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to actually show you the new map scaling tool, which I think came out a version or two ago, but it's a relatively new thing. So what I'm going to do, we're going to use Mongoose's Mission To Mithril adventure. It's a superb adventure. I think it took me a week, maybe 2 weeks to play, a little bit every night, and it was really good fun. So for those who don't know, Sojour can actually take out maps and tokens directly from your scenario books. That's one of its greatest features, and possibly a unique feature, I don't know. So we're going to take a map from this for, I think it's Mithril Downport. I know it's in here somewhere. There we go. We're going to take that and use it as a map. So let's make it a little bit bigger so we have a nice image to work with. And like I say, Sojour has built-in screenshot facilities that will help us here. So all you need to do is right click the maps, hit add map, but rather than just a normal map, we're going to add map from screenshot. Sojour disappears, and then you can left click once, and then you get this nice little red rectangle. You don't need to hold the mouse down, and then click again, and Sojour captures that, give it a name, so we'll call it Mithril Downport. Okay, that, and there you go, that's now in Sojour. However, it's unscaled, so it's not really useful as a map. I mean, it looks nice, but to use it in a game would be quite hard because you don't know how far all the various bits and bobs are. Now, unfortunately, this one doesn't actually have a scale on it, so you're going to have to kind of guess how big things are. And the way I usually do this is look at things like doorways. So this doorway, I reckon, is what? That's about 1.5 meters, isn't it? So to scale it, you use the scale map button. And like I say, in this version of Sojour, I think the previous one, you now get this brand new map scale assistant. It's far better than the original one. And the reason why is because this assistant takes measurements directly from the map as opposed to a picture of the map, and that results in much more accurate results. So the first thing you're asked to do is define your yardstick that you're going to use to measure the map with. Now you can pick whichever system you want. It defaults to the measurement system of your rule set, but it will allow you, for instance, to pick Imperial. But if I was to pick Imperial, it would still import the map as metric. It will just run the conversions. So that's kind of handy, because if you imagine I'm playing Traveller and I have a map I want to bring in and that has a scale on it that's in miles, I can set this to Imperial, import it, and then Sojour will automatically convert it to metric to be used with Traveller's rule set. But anyway, we're going to leave this on metric, and we want 1.5 meters, which I think is in the drop down, but you can also type it as well. Type anything you want in here. So we've created a yardstick of 1.5 meters. You can then set the colors. So this defines what a lot of the measurement tools are going to look like in terms of color. And the reason why I've defined that is obviously different colors match different maps. I think red is perfect for this map, so we'll leave it on red. And then finally, you hit register scale, and this is where this tool varies from the original one provided Sojour, and that once I click this button, I can then register directly on the map itself, and I can pan and zoom whilst I'm doing it. Now we want to get in pretty close to this doorway, click there, and there's our yardstick of 1.5 meters that we defined. We reckon it's about there, isn't it? There you go. And it's calculated this map as 194 meters by 162 meters. If you're not happy, you can go back through the wizard or register scale again. It's all quite flexible. So we've okayed that, and now bottom left we have a scale. So this is a fully scale map. It means you could do little things like take measurements and all that kind of stuff. So and it's handy for when you move your tokens around. So that's the scale map. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a character, or maybe two. And again, we're going to use Sojour's built-in functionality for pulling characters directly out your scenario books. And not only will Sojour do that, but it'll create circular tokens for you as well. It's pretty advanced in that respect. So you hit add character. This is the dialog box you kind of saw earlier. The big difference is, note we have the characteristics that we defined earlier for the rule set: strength, dexterity, endurance. And note they're also color coded as well to represent the colors that you set up, and also to remind you that the health bars, blue is going to be strength, sort of violet's going to be dexterity, and purple is going to be endurance. And you can change all that as well later on. If you're not happy with any of this, you can edit it, but we're not going to. So we're going to add a picture and to be used for our token. We're going to take it directly from the Mission To Mithril rulebook, and this is what makes Sojour so powerful. Now I know toward the end of this adventure there's a whole bunch of characters that you meet. Yeah, we'll take him. So this is Eric Bothilder, I think that's how you pronounce it. And again, using Sojour's functionality, I can add a normal image, or I can take it from screenshots. Let's take it from a screenshot, and it's a similar thing to the map. Then you draw a square boundary, hit OK, and he's in. Now, you could use him like that, but it doesn't make a very nice looking token. So Sojour has built-in functionality to actually create tokens for you. And I think a nice orange one would be great for him, so click that. And boom, I now have a nice circular token for Eric, straight out of the scenario book. It's a really handy feature. So let's put his name in, Eric Bothilder, I think I was right. We'll leave it like that. And what we'll do now, we'll add some characteristics. And I'm only going to add 2, and I'll explain why in a second. So he's got a strength of 8 and a dex of 7. So let's pop those in. So why aren't I filling out endurance? Well, it's because I want to demonstrate something to you. So the way characteristics work in this version of Sojour is, firstly you pick your set. Now I only have one set of characteristics, and that's called characteristics. And the reason why Sojour supports sets is because in many rules you use different characteristics to model different things. So for instance, a starship might have different characteristics from a character, and an animal might have different characteristics. And Sojour lets you create different sets of characteristics. So, like I said, the current limitation is there's only 4 characteristics per set. But hopefully I'll get around that in some future update. Now, what it does do, as a handy feature, if you pick a set and you look at it and go, oh yeah, great characteristics, it's got strength, dex, X, and endurance, but I don't want endurance. So how do you get rid of it? Well, the way Sojour works, if you set any of these to 0, it's treated as not being a live characteristic. So if we hit OK now, with endurance as 0, we're only going to see 2 health bars because we're treating endurance as something we're not interested in. And this is a great way to pick a subset of the characteristics you want to use, because sometimes you don't want to create a whole new set of characteristics. You might just want to use 1 or 2 from an existing set. And in this case, just for demonstration purposes, I've only picked strength and dex. So when I hit OK, there you go, Eric has just 2 bars. And when you hover over him, you can see that it now says his strength is 8, dex is 7. And when you drag him to the map, it takes the bars with you. And there he goes. And again, on the map, when you can hover over. Now, how do you change these characteristics? Because obviously you can't change them, they're kind of pointless. The whole point of having trackable characteristics is that they alter over time. On Sojour design, that you can use a mouse wheel to do this. And the way I've set it up is that your 4 characteristics, you can have up to 4, they're all altered via the mouse wheel. The only difference is you change the keys that you're pressing whilst you're doing it. So the first characteristic is just the mouse wheel. The second one in is the control key and mouse wheel. Third one in is the shift key and mouse wheel. And the fourth one in is shift and control with the mouse wheel. And that's kind of why I've limited it to 4 characteristics right now. I think I have a cutting plan around that for later on. That way I can undo the restrictions I've put in the system and enable you to add as many as you want. But for now, I'm limiting you to 4. And like I say, this is an iterative thing, and it's way better than what we had. And I suspect it's way better than many of the other VTTs as well. So you can change characteristics in 2 places. You can either do it on the portraits up here, or you can do it actually directly on the map, which is brand new. You couldn't do that in the previous version of Sojour. Now, to change the characteristics on the map, you need to wait till this cursor changes shape. And the way you do it is you wave the cursor over the characteristics. And as soon as it goes over the characteristics bars, you get that little up-down white arrow that you see there. So if I take it off, it goes back to a crosshair, back on, up-down arrow. When it's in that up-down arrow shape, that tells you that you can alter the characteristics. And you don't have to hover over a specific characteristic, there's no need for that. All you need to do is just get it somewhere where the up down arrow is, and then you use the various combinations of just mouse wheel, control mouse wheel and so forth to pick the relevant characteristic. So if I want to do the first one, it's just the mouse wheel on its own. And as you can see, it alters both here and it's altering up here. And you can do the second one as well, so with the control key in this case. And again, it alters in both places. Notice that the number that you see going up, it's in the color of the characteristic that you're altering, so that way you can easily see what characteristic you're changing. Of course, it updates these bits and bobs. And you can do it from up here as well, although on the portraits you can do it anywhere, so, and there you go, both places. Now I should probably point out something about these characteristic bars. They're percentage based, so their length doesn't represent specific numerical values. For instance, we hover over him, one of those values is 8, the other is 7, but they're both the same length. And that's because they represent percentages of those characteristics. So what we're saying is his strength is at 100%, his dex is 100%. I did toy with a version that actually did show actual specific values, but I found it became hard to read, basically. This is a far easier way. And, you know, if you want to see the actual specific values, you just wave the cursor over either the image there or up here, and you can see exactly what the values are anyway. So that's, I guess, an initial introduction. So what about his third one? Because he actually has a endurance characteristic, so let's get that one online as well. Now I know in the book I think it's something like 9, isn't it? Yeah, 9. I'm not going to use 9, and the reason why is because we set this to be hexadecimal, and I want to prove that this can do hexadecimal. So let's go pop a hexadecimal number in there. And of course, this is all validated. So if you put complete garbage in here, it turns red, and the OK button's disabled. So it knows if you're about to put something bad in. So we're putting a B in. Now, if I hadn't set hexadecimal, I wouldn't be allowed to put a B in, because that's not a hexadecimal number. By putting a value in, we've now activated his characteristics. So he's got 2 now, but as soon as I hit OK, we're going to be up to 3. And there you go. The third one's popped up. Hover over, strength 8, dex 7, endurance P, and if I want to change the third one, that's the shift key and mouse wheel. And as you see, it respects the hexadecimal stuff. And you can't go over your initial values. So these values that you set here, they're your maximum values in effect. And the values that you see on the health bars are your current values. And yeah, very easy to change them all. So it's a very flexible system in that you can add up to 4 health bars to each entity, and as I'm going to show you later on, they don't need to all have the same health bars. You can create specialist health bars for each different thing that you want to model, so it's all pretty good in that respect. What I'm going to do next is import some monsters or animals, and they go into tokens. There's a number of, I guess, subtle differences between tokens and characters, and maybe campaign assets as well, and I want to use this as an example. And again, we're going to use Sojour's powerful facilities to actually pull it directly out of the scenario book you're running. So I know there's a bunch of animals defined in here somewhere. Here we go. We'll use the Calamander. That's a pretty good beast to put into Sojour. So all we need to do, open up the tokens palette, hit the plus button, take into a similar dialog window, and again we're going to take a picture directly from the scenario book because Sojour can do that, and again much like the map. And I've found during testing that you want to make this as square as possible. They make the best tokens basically, so about there I think. And that's in. And again we can use Sojour's advanced functionality to convert this into an actual circular token, and there you go. We now have a green token for this monster. So that was a Calamander. Let's pop that in. Calamander. Cool. Right, so, and in fact, we're going to make these beasts a little bit bigger than the humans, so let's change relative size. So for those who don't know, in fact, let's make it 1.2. For those who don't know, Sojour, it unifies all of the tokens that you put in, so you can put in tokens for it that are all sorts of real different sizes. So if you looked at the files, they might have many different sizes, but Sojour automatically unifies them all to be the same size. It was designed that way to enable you to use any source for your tokens, and it will automatically make them all the same size. But you do have this ability to change the relative sizes. You know, if you've got a dragon or something, you want that to be huge. If you've got, I don't know, a rabbit or something, you might want that to be smaller. And this allows you to do that. And we're setting this to 1.2, so it's going to be a little bit bigger than the standard human tokens. Anyway, the next thing to do is set the characteristics for this Calamander. And we've run into our first problem. And that is, in Traveller, animals don't have strength, dex, and endurance. So what do? Well, luckily the characteristics system has a way around that, and that is you can create a brand new set of characteristics. So in Traveller, at least from Mongoose Traveller, I believe it's hits, so it's this one up here. So we're going to need to add a characteristic set that just models hits. So let's go do that now. There are 2 ways to do this. You can either do it from here by clicking the 3 buttons, or you can right click on the rule set and edit from there, and I'll show that later on, but they all take you to the same place. So let's do it here because it's faster. This takes you to the characteristics editor again. This set of characteristics is part of the characteristics set, but we're going to add a brand new one for animals specifically. So we'll call it animals. Yeah, okay, and that's our brand new set. There's nothing in it right now, but we'll add one in. And like I said, they're called hits for animals in Traveller. We'll call it hits in there. green. Yeah, green's a good colour, and it affects mortality. They're not hex-based, so it's kind of odd. In the original Traveller, everything's hex-based, but in Mongoose Traveller, animals are decimal, humans are hex. Yeah. So we'll leave that turned off. And that's all you need to do. So we hit OK. And now, when we go back to this screen, we get a choice. We can either pick between animal-based characteristics, or we can pick human-based characteristics, or any other set that we add to Sojour. It's a very, very flexible system. So we're going to pick animals, because this is an animal, and if we look on here, it's 14, so we can add 14 hits. And we'll OK that, and there he is. So I've shown you the set side of it. In fact, whilst we're here, I'll show you. So the other way of getting to the characteristics set editor isn't just via the various entity windows. You can also do it via the rule set, because these characteristics are rule set based. So every set of rules gets its own set of characteristics, basically. And to get a Traveller's, all you need to do is right click on Traveller and select Edit Traveller's Characteristics Set, so you can do it from there. So yeah, it's a nice flexible system. So the reason why I've brought animals into this is tokens are different from characters in Sojour, and for good reason. And what makes them different is that these can be multi-instance. So if we take Eric, for instance, if I was to drag him onto the map again, what you would find is he would just move. You wouldn't get a second Eric, because that doesn't make sense. Characters only sort of appear once. And that's a key design of Sojour, the fact that Eric is unique. However, tokens aren't. Tokens can be multi-instance. You can create as many of them as you want, and that's the fundamental difference. And campaign assets, which we'll come on to later on, they can be unique or multi-instance. You get a choice, and I'll cover that as well. So let's add some monsters to the map. Like I said, I made them a little bit bigger, so it's about 1.2 bigger. There's our mobs. So Eric's got a bit of a problem right now on the lizard front, but hopefully you can handle it. So these monsters, because they can be multi-instance, Sojour would automatically name them. So Calamander 1, 2, and 3, and so forth. What Sojour actually allows you to do, though, is you can decide to perhaps rename one of them, the on-map name. And you know, that's sometimes handy. So most of the times you don't bother, because monsters are kind of throwaway characters, a bit like the red shirts in Star Trek. None of them have any names because they're probably going to die in the game. And that might be the case with these Calamanders, so keeping them as Calamander 1, 2 and 3 might be fine. Occasionally you might want to single one or two of your NPCs to be a little bit more unique. Maybe it's a leader or something. So all you need to do is literally right click and you can rename it. So we can call this one Sarnak, which is a Star Warsy name. Hit OK, and now when I wave my mouse cursor over, it's Calamander 1, Sarnak, and Calamander 3, and is it this one here? It should be renamed here as well. 1, Sarnak, and Calamander 3. So, and that's a handy way to add a little bit of uniqueness to a type of token that can be multi-instanced. You do tend to find in many role-playing games, if you've got a bunch of goblins heading your way or some other type of monster, generally speaking, they'll have a leader with them. Now, there are some other differences between these multi-instance tokens and a character. And the biggest one in terms of character sets is it enables you to, instead of just giving them numeric values, you can actually put in dice expressions. And in that way, every time you drag a Calamander to the map, it gets given a different set of characteristics based on what the dice rolls were. So to demonstrate this, before I demonstrate it, we'll add a whole new characteristic. Let's see, and what should maybe they have psionics. It doesn't affect mortality, and we'll change the color to that. Let's make it blue. and that appears there. Now, in fact, I can actually show you another difference between the two before I go into the dice expressions. Because tokens are multi-instance, what Sojour does is it respects your current tokens. So if I was to add psionics here, even if I was to give it an actual value to make it an active field, you'll find when I hit OK, these ones don't change, because Sojour respects them. Because they're multi-instance, each instance is its own thing. So these Calamanders carry on operating the way they were. However, if I was to drag a new one from the map, that gets the new characteristics. And again, you can alter those using the mouse wheel. Whereas if I did that with Eric, if we added, I don't know, psionics to him, it's a little bit different, because if I give it an actual value as opposed to leaving it at 0, let's say he went to the clinic and they found out that yes, he has some psychic potential, so we'll put in 9 there, hit OK, and there you go, that appears immediately. And that's because Eric's unique. There's only one of him, and Sojour can update him, and again you can manipulate that. In this case it would be the Control Shift at mouse wheel. And of course, if later on you decide you don't want Eric to have that characteristic, or maybe he isn't psionically gifted, but you want that characteristic available for the characters, you can just put 0 in there, and then that will remove it, and Eric's back down to 3 again. So that's one difference between the two. But the other difference is, unlike single-use characters, you can put dice expressions in here. And the reason why I don't allow dice expressions for unique characters is because it doesn't make sense. I mean, why would Eric's strength, for instance, randomly change every time you drag into a map? It doesn't make any sense at all. And in fact, if you have Eric on multiple maps, they all share the same points because he is the same person. Whereas these monsters, they're all unique to a particular map. So what we're going to do, we'll leave psionics as it is at 15, but we're going to change the hits to be completely random. So I don't know, let's go 3d6 and maybe +2. And note this field, again, is validating things. So if you put in something bad, it goes red and you can't hit OK. So when I drag this third generation of Calamander to the map, what's actually going to happen is it's going to roll the hits for me, and it's going to give it, it's always going to give it 15 points for psionics. So let's do that now. So let's zoom out a bit. And what you'll find is your 2 bars. Notice that the left-hand bar, the hits bar, is grey, it's not green. What's going on there? And that's because at this point the dice haven't been rolled. So this Calamander doesn't have any hit points until I drop him on the map. And then once I drop him, Sojour will roll those dice and populate the hit points, which is why that's currently grey. So if I drop him down, there you go, rolled, goes green. So now row goes green. And if we have a look at their characteristics, so this one's at 18 and 15, and this one's at 19 and 15. So not too much difference between the two. And of course, you know, if I was to say, okay, maybe psionics is rolled for as well, 2d4, both bars will now be grey when I drag it, because they're not set right now. And they only get set once I drop the Calamander down and it rolls the dice. So that's a good indicator to you that the dice are being rolled, basically. So that is the other difference, the fact you can put dice expressions. That gives you the variability in your mobs. And like I say, if you try to do it with a single character, Sojour just won't let you. So if I just open up Eric and put in 2d4 for his psionics, it won't let you. Or it shouldn't let you, he says. Hang on, it's taken that because that is a genuine hex number. Maybe if I try 2d4 plus, there you go, 2. Yeah, I know that's a valid dice roll. Right now, it's not going to accept that, even if I go a little d +2. Oh, sorry, yeah, it maximizes anyway. So yeah, that's not valid. It's just not valid. And I say it makes sense when you think about it, because Eric is a single person, and you don't want his characteristics to change every time you drag into a map, and that's why Sojour doesn't let you do this. So another feature I'd like to show you, and this is just a very quick feature. Some people might not want these health bars on all the time for various reasons. So each map has a hide characteristic bars button which you can click and it hides them. It's a toggle basically, you can toggle them on and off, and each map remembers that setting. So you can have certain maps that don't have them, others that do, and that's saved with the map. So next time you load the map up, this button will default to whatever state that you wish. So if you want a clean map, turn them off. If you don't want a clean map, turn them on. So anyway, let's get rid of some of these monsters, because poor old Eric's probably having a really bad time right now. So I think that's what I want to talk about, characteristics. And like I say, they're very flexible. Like for instance with Traveller, for example, you know, you've got starships in Traveller, so you can't use animals because starships don't have hits. You can't use characteristics, so you just create a whole new one and we'll call it starships. And I believe Traveller, they're called hull points in Traveller, so let's put that in. Oops. I can type HP, let's give it a different colour, and it affects mortality, so its hull points go down, your ship explodes. So now if we create some random entity, maybe a campaign asset, enable characteristics, and you've got a choice. You can pick between animals, human based characteristics, or starship based characteristics. It's a very, very flexible system. The next thing I want to talk about is mortality, or how Sojour treats tokens, whether they're alive or dead and so forth. Now in the original system, only your NPCs had mortality because they always had hit points, and whenever they went to 0 or less, the token would disappear off the map. Now in this version of Sojour, and I think this has been in for a few versions now, you can actually turn that feature off. So by default it does hide dead tokens, but if you want your tokens to always be visible, just untick that basically. And I'll show you both right now. So the mortality calculations, if we have a look at our characteristics, so for animals for instance, only hits contributes towards mortality. It doesn't care about sonics because I haven't ticked it, and I can prove that if we go over to this colour render here. If we drop its psionics down to below 0, nothing happens, and that's because they don't impact mortality. Whereas if I drop his hit points down, as soon as that gets to 0, he should disappear because he's dead. There you go, now completely dead. And you can actually bring them back. Whenever they go from the map, they're always visible on the journal. So when you go here, you can just click there and then either make him more dead, because some rule sets there go much further down in the negatives because they have different meanings, or you can resurrect it. And of course, if you want your dead characters to always be visible, you can actually say untick that and it should reappear. There you go. And if we were to what I'll do, I prefer to hide my dead tokens because that's the way I like to play, generally speaking. Right, so that's one way. What about Eric? Now if we look at Eric's characteristics, we've set him up so that these three contribute towards mortality, and we haven't clicked death on a single 0 characteristic. So what we're saying is for Eric, all three of these characteristics need to go down to 0. So let's do that now just to prove it. So let's start off with that one, then we'll take the next one. No, he's still alive. It's only when this final characteristic goes down to 0 that he'll die. And of course you can change the settings so that it's death on any single characteristic. So let's do that now. So it's characteristics, and we'll tick that. So now any one characteristic that falls below 0 will kill Eric. There you go, and now he's dead. So there's a lot of flexibility with how the mortality calculations are carried out in Sojour. Anyway, we'll set that back to the way it was because that's how it works in Traveller. But you can make it whatever you want. The next thing I want to talk about is an enhancements that I've made to campaign assets, and for that we'll close the Traveller stuff down and go back to our fantasy one. which is this one, and to actually switch maps to North Sojourny, which is a completely made up map that I created. And I'm going to show you some of the new things you can do with campaign assets. Now this was actually something that in fact we've still got Traveller open there. Let's add it to the proper one. I wondered why the characters weren't showing. Right, so we're going to add campaign assets. Now what is a campaign asset? Because you know that dialogue kind of looks the same as the others. So basically a campaign asset is any entity that is neither a character, so it will never show up on the character bar, and is also not a monster. So it doesn't go into tokens. So anything, I mean, a good example, for instance, in Traveller, which we were in, it would be the starship. That'd be a perfect campaign asset. Or in this fantasy game, you might have a token to represent your party, which you might move on a large scale map like this. That's a perfect campaign asset. And you can use this for lots of other things, simply because we've added these new tick boxes here, and I think they've been in for a few versions now. And this was an idea provided to me from a customer, and this is one thing I want to reiterate. Sojour's enhancements come from two places. They come from my head, but they also come from your heads as well. And it's a collaborative effort. Once you've paid your $10, you're part of the Sojour community, and you know, in the front of the manual there's an email address. So if you have a great idea that you want to see in Sojour, go send me an email. Now I can't promise I could do everything because there's only one of me, and I also need to take into account Sojour's future direction. But in general, if you give me a good idea and I think it's a good idea, it will go in. It might take time to get there, but it will generally go in. And there have been numerous additions to Sojour, all of which have made it a much better system. And the ideas have come from my customers. So yeah, I think the only way we can make this a better product is by getting that feedback. And it works, it's not just positive feedback. If there's something in Sojour that's really irritating you, then please let me know. And you know, maybe there's nothing I could do about it because it's an inherent part of the design, but if it is something I can do something about, then I will certainly look at it. And even the bits and bobs that perhaps I don't action straight away, they will go in my Jira system. And that way, you know, maybe 2 or 3 other people talk to me with exactly the same thing, in which case the priority goes up and then I go and work on it. So yeah, you have any ideas for features, please contact me. Anyway, after a little bit of a digression, back to campaign assets. So what we're going to do, I'm going to create an asset that represents a we'll do one that represents a geographical feature, a cave. So if we go to our picture, go to desktop, and I've got a little data folder up there, cave. Now let's call it cave. And this cave doesn't have any trackable characteristics, though I could enable them and pick some if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. And note, when I tick them, I didn't have access to the other 3 sets of characteristics I created. And the reason why is because we're in a different rule set. We're under Windows Guardians, which is my own homemade RPG. This is designed so that I could write the manual without being done for copyright infringements. So that's why I'm not seeing the other characteristic sets there, because every rule set you create has its own sets of characteristics. And I could add my own ones for this particular one, but we're not going to bother. So what we're going to do with these caves, I'm going to say we're not going to have them as unique. We're going to make them multi-instance, like the tokens. That's the difference between this and tokens, is you can choose whether they're unique or not. Now if they're unique, when you drag them multiple times to the map, they'll move. If they're not unique, you get different instances. And it also affects what you can put in the characteristics. Obviously non-unique, you can go for dice expressions, but unique you can't. That's kind of how it works. So this one, I'm going to leave the tooltips on because I want to see tooltips on the map. I'm also going to make it static. And what static does is it tells Sojour that this token cannot be moved. And you might be thinking that's a bit of a crazy idea, but it actually comes in handy for terrain features that perhaps your characters discover on their onward journey. So let's give it a bit of text. So Right, so this is our characteristic. So it's going to show tooltips. It's going to also make static. In fact, one thing I just noticed, it says add party asset. That's, yeah, I need to fix that. In fact, that will be fixed before 1.1 comes out. So basically, in the old days when when Sojour was very, very young, campaign assets are known as party assets, and through various iterations they got changed. So this name got changed to campaign assets, but the form never got changed. So I'm going to change that. It's a trivial change, but one that needs doing. Alright, so we have our cave. We've made it static. And by the way, these settings you can change. So if you've dragged all your caves to the map and all of a sudden you actually want to move them or do anything else with them, you can actually go into here and just change the settings and off you go. So, and we can have multiple ones of these and they're static. So let's say we have a few characters on the map. And these characters are from, let's say, an original video demonstration from an earlier version of Sojour, which is why they have no health bars. But as I mentioned earlier, you can add them. So, you know, just because they didn't come with any to begin with, you can just add them. I'm not going to bother creating characteristics there, I'll just add them with some random values. I think you should start seeing some, you know, health bars turn up and so forth. I won't do all of them, I'll just do the ones I've got on the map. I think that's even, isn't it? So here we go. Cool, so they all got the health bars and they work just like all the other systems where you can do that or do it up here. It's up to you. Alright, so let's pretend that they've all left the city of Sojour. It's early in the morning, the sun's about to rise, it's a little bit cold, and they spotted some caves. So now with this campaign asset, you can quite literally drag a cave symbol onto the map. And maybe they've discovered another cave further down. Now these cave symbols, unlike the characters, notice the cursor doesn't change when it's over them, it stays as a crosshair. So that tells me I can't move them. That at this point they are an intrinsic part of the map, almost like they are like they've always been there. Whereas the characters, we can obviously move them around as we see fit. Now of course, cave isn't a very good description, so just like multi-instance tokens, Sojour lets you rename these. So I don't know, maybe this is a bandit hideout, so let's call this bandit hideout. Maybe the other one is, let's call it the Rainbow Mounds from like RuneQuest. It's a very famous dungeon in RuneQuest. Oops, my spelling is bad. And now when I wave my mouse cursor over them, you can actually see what they are. And that kind of campaign asset enables you to populate your maps as you discover things. So yeah, very, very handy features to have. And of course, because Sojour supports a thing called map linking, I can actually link these to their associated maps. So you double click on the bandit hideout and Sojour will open the bandit hideout map for you automatically by using map links. But that's beyond the scope of this video. You'll have to watch one of the other videos for that. So yeah, in the past you couldn't do that. In the past, campaign assets were simply like tokens, more or less. The only difference is they never showed up here. Whereas now you have a lot more flexibility thanks to these additional fields. And as I say, they weren't my idea. This particular idea came from my customers, and it's an idea I've used in my games. So really, really happy that one of my customers gave me this idea. And as I mentioned before, I'm trying to foster a community spirit. It's not just about me unilaterally making design decisions. I want feedback from you folks, and all you need to do is go to the front of the manual, and there's an email address now. You can contact me on that. So that's all I want to talk about on campaign assets. The next thing I want to talk about are minor improvements to the speech system. Do we want to use one of our originals? No, I don't really want to mess that up. So let's add a new journal. Call it test because I want to delete it later on. So we have our test journal. Now, when you got characters to converse in the original version of Sojour, you'd use a combination of the shift and control keys. In fact, let's put an NPC or two on there as well. Just to, in fact, no, we can switch map, can't we? Well, we don't need to use this map. We can switch map. Let's go Fort Carl Manor. As you see, these now have their new bars that I added for them. I didn't give bars to everyone, but there you go. Anyway, so we've got this map. We'll go back to here, and we should have our populated with a bunch of NPCs as well. So yeah, to get things to talk in the old days, the way it worked is you'd have a journal open, and you'd use the control key and a number to pick a character, or control shift and a number to pick an NPC. And the idea was the number would be related to their position. So for example, AIS would be control 1, Cora control 2, even though control 3 and so forth, and you could mix and match. It was a pretty good system. But it had a few issues. The first issue is you had to count, and you're typing away your story, and I want Garion to talk, and I'm looking up at the top, and I'm thinking, which one is he? And you go, oh yeah, he's like the fourth. You're having to count 4, and if you've got more characters, it becomes a bigger pain to count them. Now, what you can do now, Sojour's being enhanced so that when you start to get them to talk with the control key, it puts numbers in, so you can see straight away what they are. So the minute that control key goes there, I say, yeah, Garion's 4, Miri's 5. So if I want to get, say, even Dur and Miri to talk, that would be 3 and 5. And those numbers stay up until you finish conversing. Nice programmer joke, which I spelt wrong. In fact, let's get that spelt correctly. Right, so that should make things easier, and it's the same for these NPCs here. You can see they're numbered there as well. I don't know how clear that shows on the video. So that should make getting your picking your conversations easier to do. But it has another problem. I wish I stopped typing around things. The other problem is that one of my customers, they had a big game going on, and they were talking to me and saying, I've got a problem. And the problem was that they had over 10 monsters on their map, and they couldn't get them to talk because that their number keys, that they run out at night, basically. So how do you get the additional ones to talk? And I thought, that's a bit of a problem. So I've added an enhancement where you could also get the characters to talk directly from the map. And the way you do it is by control-shift-clicking the relevant character. And you can stack them as well. So for example, if I control-shift-click him, he's now in a conversation. Maybe I add a horse, because horses like talking. Maybe a goblin or two. You can keep stacking them like this. So that feature neatly gets around the limitation of only having 9 positions. And some people might actually genuinely find this easier to do, because rather than having to look at a particular goblin, because they kind of all look the same, and waiting for the map to center on them, you can quite literally just control-shift-click on them, and away you go. Oh yeah, that covers off something else I want to talk about as well. Because some people might see this as a bug, but it's not. It's in programming speak, it's a feature, and it's the only way it can be done, unfortunately. So Sojour has a concept of focus. And the way focus works in Sojour is if your mouse is anywhere over the map takes all your keyboard input, so you can do things like that. But it does mean if I want to type anything in the journal, nothing happens in the journal. I just end up moving the map around a bit. So if you want to type anything in the journal, your mouse cursor needs to be anywhere but a map, and then the journal will work like that. So that's not a bug, it's a feature, and just one to be aware of. I've thought about this many times to see how I could do it better, but I think this is about the best we can do for that. But I say this new feature, it's handy because you can identify a particular character straight away, even if they've all got the same token, and immediately shift click and you can stack them, and away you go. So yeah, that's a great enhancement. So one other minor enhancement is it's to do with when you decide to stop talking. So for instance, let's say we get Cora to talk. In the past, and I always used to do this, I'd get someone to talk and then I think, well, actually I don't want them to talk anymore. So rather than sort of toggle them off by hitting Control 2 again, what I would do, and I'm sure most people do this, I hit the backspace key, because I don't want to see that anymore. And what the new system does, it immediately takes you out of talking mode, whereas prior to this later system, that didn't happen. So yeah, that's a major plus point. So what else has changed in and around the journal? Well, there's been some minor enhancements to the dice rollers. So for those that don't know, there are actually two sets of dice rollers in every journal. You have the ones down here in this list, and what this list does is as you type in dice expressions, it remembers them, and it also orders them by how often you use them. So the most used ones are at the top, the least used ones are at the bottom. It's a list of 10, so if you roll an 11th set of a combination of dice, the least used one rolls off the bottom of the list. So anyway, we'll put in a dice expression. You can go nuts here if you wish. So let's go +2 minus 2d10. You probably never roll. And of course it goes red if it's a bad expression. And you know, if you roll this, it comes up there. You've actually got detailed rolling turned on, which is why you've got this extra information here. You can actually turn that off in general settings. So you've got your general, your dice roller there, but Sojour also has a built-in intrinsic dice roller, which is used when you actually want to include a result from a roll in something you're typing, for instance. And you do those with square brackets. So if I want to roll 2d6 +2, if you close that off, it will roll those dice and replace that with a value. And you go for something with a little bit more detail by using the braces instead. Let's do 2d6 +2d6, not entirely sure. Let's do 2d8. And if you close that off, you get an expanded expression telling you what's going on. Now, again, this is another customer idea. One of my customers will say to me, so I like the inline roller because it's handy when you're typing, but I'd also like to occasionally use the standard format text as opposed to this kind of text. And now you can do that. And the way you do it is by doubling up the first bracket. So if I now go 2d6 +2 and then close it off, it works. I'll do the same with this. So you get a choice now with the inline roller of going for the dice roll itself, or you can go for the traditional text. You have a choice now. Now you're probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of keyboard commands to remember, but you don't really need to remember them because both the map and the journal come with shortcut helpers. That's these little windows here. And they appear where you last left them, so I obviously last left this over here. And this window, it's modeless, so what that means is you can go do stuff whilst it's open. You can type stuff and so forth. So having the window open has no effect on Sojour at all. But this window, it gives you a list of all of the commands, the shortcuts that you can do. So if you're new to Sojour, you can keep one of those up, do your typing, and just refer to this as you're going along. And after a while, hopefully, if I've coded this right, this will become intuitive anyway, then you can close that and not have to use it anymore. The map has the same thing. I think, see, that's where I last left it as well, because it does remember it. So, if I leave that down here and close it and then reopen it, it's going to appear down there. And again, the map has a similar thing where it has all of the shortcuts. So you don't need to remember them. You don't need to go into the manual. And again, you can leave that up and use that as like an Aide-Memoire. So don't ever feel that there's too many shortcuts to remember, that you can always access them. And of course, ultimately, you can get the help. And the helps are, I think it's up to 140 odd pages. Yeah, 142 pages. So it's every time I add new features that the help gets expanded. And in fact, this time around, it had to go for a massive rewrite because nearly every single screenshot changed. And that took quite a bit of time. But I pride myself on having a pretty decent manual with Sojour, so even if you're not watching the videos or anything like that, you can actually just open up the manual and away you go. And in fact, there's a slight enhancement to this, which is almost a comedy enhancement. The original versions of Sojour, the only way you could open the help was by using this. and instructions for opening the help were in the manual. So you had this kind of circular thing going on where you wouldn't necessarily know that button opened the manual unless you read the manual. Yeah, a bit of a comedy thing. So newer versions of Sojour by default put a shortcut of the manual directly onto your desktop, and hopefully that will resolve that kind of issue. I think that covers off pretty much everything I want to talk about in 1.1. Like I said, the earlier videos that are up there, they're still kind of useful because most of what's in them is correct. It's just that we now have all these other enhancements. Now, this was supposed to have come out last week. We're a little bit late. And the reason for this was basically when I decided to add those characteristics to the system, I was going to make them like one set of characteristics and that's that. And then I thought, hey, wouldn't it be good if we had sets of characteristics? And I did that, and you know, the coding was relatively straightforward, but the testing, oh boy, did that impact the testing. And to give you an example, here's a screenshot from my Jira system. And this is what I use to manage my software development. And any requests you give to me about, you know, things you'd like to see in Sojour, they go into Jira. So that even if I don't necessarily act on them straight away, they're in my system. So any email you send me isn't wasted, basically. But anyway, going back to health bar improvements, the reason why this is late, if you look at the estimate, I originally estimated 4 days, I think 8 days, 8 hours of coding. The final logged thing was like 1 week, 2 days, 2 hours. I mean, thank God I was on holidays because I actually had enough time to do this. Because you have to bear in mind, this isn't my day job. I'm actually a senior web developer as my day job. Sojour was more of a bit of a sideline. And I only wrote it because I found the current VTTs weren't really suited for solo play. They're super great at multiplayer over the internet play, but they're not very good at solo play, which is why I wrote Sojour. But yeah, it took almost like twice as long. And if you look here, there's like 75 code commits. So I wrote 75 sets of code and committed them. It was one of those things, and that came from testing because there's so many combinations of things you can do with these characteristics you just wouldn't believe. And it's amazing how I didn't think about that up front. I thought, yeah, adding the functionality, that's easy, and it was. But testing-wise, everything just spiraled out of control. Hence why we're a week late. So hopefully you can forgive me for that one. So I guess the only thing we'll talk about now is, okay, you're interested in Sojour, where can you get information about it? So apart from the YouTube channel, which you know about because you're watching this video right now, there's also a blog. And that blog contains up-to-date information about what's going on with Sojour. So let's go to the blog. So the blog's at sojour.co.uk. I'm using a default blog style here. This isn't one of mine. But one of the things with this blog style is you need to use a mouse wheel to see the rest of the blog, otherwise you won't know. Yeah, maybe I'll change that later on. But this blog is absolutely the place to go if you want to see the latest news with regard to Sojour, what's happening to it, what I'm up to. Like here I'm talking about these characteristics as they're being developed. And it also gives you the ability, because you can comment on these, you know, if you see me doing something and you think, that's a bad idea, then put a comment in and then I can take what you're saying on board and maybe make some changes in and around that. This is updated pretty regularly as I update it. I tell you what the enhancements are, what the fixes are. I also tell you what bugs are still outstanding, if there are already, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 in there, both of which I can't reproduce, by the way, but I still leave them in the system. There's links to other videos I've created which might be handy for you. Yeah, so it's a very good source of information, and I highly recommend that if you want to keep track of what's happening in Sojour, you at least subscribe to this blog, and that way you'll get all the latest information. Now, for those of you that don't own Sojour, and you're thinking, wow, that makes a pretty good solo virtual tabletop, where can I get it? It's sold on DriveThruRPG, and you can get to it either through a link on this blog, or just do a search for Sojour VTT in DriveThru. In fact, we can go there now. So the way this works is I'm selling it for $10 USD. which I've been told is actually too cheap, but I'm happy with the pricing. You know, maybe the price can go up later on, but for now I'm happy with $10. And that $10 is it's a one-off payment, and because there are no servers involved and no DRM, it's yours to keep, and there's no add-ons. So when new features come out, you get those for free. So it's an initial $10 investment, and that's all you ever need to pay. So I think you're getting pretty good value for money, especially given what Sojour actually does. So yeah, and it's had pretty good reviews. It's got so far 4 ratings, 5 out of 5. If you own Sojour and you think it's good, then please add to the reviews. The more the merrier, basically. And in fact, speaking of which, one of the most difficult things, which I didn't appreciate until I started writing my own software, is that of marketing. I kind of always viewed, I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, I kind of always viewed marketers as kind of like freeloaders. You know, software developers are writing the software and the marketers weren't really doing anything, but they are actually doing really hard work. And that hard work is getting it out there. And it can be something that's quite hard to do. So if you buy Sojour, you're happy with it, then, you know, maybe do a YouTube video on it, maybe mention it in some forums, or write a review here. And as I say, I'm not one of these people that if you put a bad review up or whatever, are going to come after you. That's absolutely not how it works. Because to me, all feedback is good feedback. So, you know, be constructive. So if you think, yeah, this is a 1-star job, it's not worth $10 ever, then fine, give it 1 star, but actually write down why you think it's 1 star. Don't just say it's poo and leave it like that, because that doesn't tell anything to anybody. And as the developer, I'd like to know what you dislike about it, and then I can make those changes, because that's how we get an improved product. As I say, so far, people that have reviewed it have given it very good reviews. And thank you, those 4 people that took the time to do that. So I guess that's all I want to say about Sojour 1.1. I think I've covered off pretty much everything. I know there are probably 1 or 2 other enhancements in there, but they're quite minor in nature. So yeah, that's it. Like I say, if you like the video, hit like. If you want to subscribe. And again, thank you for taking the time to watch this, and goodbye.